Hi, everyone. I'm Barbara Beck, and I want to thank you for tuning in to Welcome Home, Go. 30 minutes of discussions on challenging topics that will inspire you to go, to make a difference. This shorter version, it's a spin-off of Welcome Home, was created because we know you're crazy busy, so we've made it even easier for you to find hope, to grow in your faith walk, and then go and make a difference in this challenging world of ours. You'll still get the same meaningful, inspiring discussions on topics that we believe Jesus would want us to respond to by serving wherever we're called. I want you to think about this. You've never locked eyes with anyone who was not created in the image of God. What if we saw every person as being uniquely, wonderfully created by God, deserving of our love, our care, and our attention? These next few minutes together, let's purpose to stop the busyness, to quiet our hearts, and listen for God's still, small voice. Enjoy with me now. Welcome home, go. So glad that you're with us today, viewers. We have some important conversations that are going to be happening during this particular program. We're talking about injustices and some societal issues that probably Jesus would be talking about. If he were on our planet right now, besides in all of our hearts, if he were walking on this planet, I think he'd be concerned about some of the things that we're going to be talking about. In particular today, I have a guest that is, I just feel super honored to have him with us. He's been on a panel discussion with us before with Dr. Gabriel Salguero, but Desmond Meade is here with us today as the founder and executive director of the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition. He's going to be telling us about his story and some of the things and challenges that he's faced during his years as a Christ follower and as a former felon, if I may say that, right, Desmond?
Yes, you may. One of the terms that we use is returning citizens.
Returning citizen. I like that so much better than a former felon. You're not a former felon. You're a returning citizen. You paid your dues to society. Why are you a second-class citizen now? We're going to be talking about some of that. First of all, Desmond, thank you.
Well, thank you for having me on.
I love your heart. I love having you with us. I love that that you have this enormous love for Jesus that spreads to other people and trying to help other people. One of my favorite verses that I've come upon recently as a result of some of our conversations is where it talks about speaking up. We've got to speak up for the destitute and the needy and those in society that others would cast aside. And so you are doing that as a brilliant orator, as an articulate man of God. Thank you for that. Tell us your story. What happened that got Desmond Meade in prison?
Well, Barbara, I would like to start my story really August of 2005. You know, when I was living in South Florida, and I found myself on that day actually standing in front of railroad tracks, waiting on a train to come so I can jump in front of it. You know, that day as I stood there, I was a broken man. I was homeless. I was addicted to drugs. I was recently released from prison. Now, I was raised in a Christian family, and I know that my mother did not intend for me to end up where I was, but yeah, I was there.
You knew God had a plan and a purpose for your life. You knew that from the time you were a little boy.
You know, and that was something that that was ingrained in me. But somewhere along the way, I did lose sight of that, and I did, you know, stray off the course. Yeah. I now understand this to be, you know, like when the children of Israel left Egypt. You know, Canaan, Canaan was not too far away.
Yeah.
But it took them 40 years. And,
wow.
And so I understood that God had to take me through some things to prepare me for my Canaan.
Let me ask you this real quick question before you continue on. Did you have a dad in your household growing up?
Yes, I did.
Okay. A mom and a dad.
A mom and a dad. And my dad was a pastor.
Wow. Okay.
So
okay, no excuses anymore, right? Okay.
No excuses
I can't blame it on that.
But no, that day I stood in front of those railroad tracks. You know, I was at my lowest. I had no hope, no self-esteem. And the only thing that I was thinking about was how much pain I was going to feel when I jumped in front of that train. But God did have other plans for me. And for some reason, that train didn't come that day.
Wow.
And I ended up crossing those tracks, and I walked 2 blocks further and checked myself into drug treatment. And after completing drug treatment, I moved into a homeless shelter. And while I was living at the homeless shelter, I decided to go back to school to further my education. I enrolled in a paralegal study program, did extremely well at Miami-Dade College, and I was encouraged to continue my education. And so I pursued a bachelor's degree in public safety management. And eventually, after graduating with highest honors, I was accepted into law school. And I attended Florida International University College of Law. And in May of 2014, I ended up graduating with a Juris Doctorate degree.
Congratulations.
Well, and I tell people that my story is a story of redemption, and it serves two main purposes. Number one, for those, especially your audience that's viewing this, that we all go through obstacles and adversities. And my story speaks to the fact that we can overcome anything, especially when we have God on our side and when we're living the life that is pleasing to God. That's number one. The other part of my story speaks to other individuals to let them know that when you see someone who may be on drugs or who may be a convicted felon or who may be homeless, you cannot look at them and say that they'll never amount to anything.
Right.
Because if God can take a person like me and transform me into who I am today, then he could do it for anyone.
Absolutely. So you went to jail and it was a felony conviction because of drug use?
Yes. So everything negative that has happened to me in my life has been due to my drug addiction.
And when did that
There's
start?
No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I started using drugs at an early age, as a rebellious child.
Teens?
So in my
young teens?
yes, I did. And it just compounded. And because of my drug use, we have what we call quality of life crimes. And so because I'm addicted to drugs, my number one goal is to figure out how to get the drug of my choice to use. And if I don't have the money, I have to find different ways of getting that. And so that would contribute to some of the charges. And then me just being in possession of these drugs was also a charge. So there were a lot of possession of, say, cocaine charges and stuff like that. But, I look at that period of my life and realize that period really does not define me.
Absolutely.
But what it does, it speaks to what God can take a person through.
Yeah.
And I'm here. I'm here as a living testimony.
And restore what the locusts have eaten. I mean, I love that you said about a throwaway. That person's not going to amount to anything. They're throwaways. They're second-class citizens. When no, God, if we really believe that our God is who he says he is, he can do the impossible. He can take Desmond Meade out of prison, somebody that was a drug addict. And do you ever look back, Desmond, and have any kind of desire in your life to take drugs again?
No.
Oh.
No. Whenever I look back, what I am filled with is honor and even some pride to an extent, because I'm like, wow, God chose me to take me through these things in order for me to be of greater service to him.
I love that.
And so, and that's the beautiful thing about serving God is that those things that man may consider negative or bad, right, is actually turns out to be good when it's used in his service, right? And so when I look back, no, I don't have a desire to use drugs anymore, but I appreciate what I've gone through because it allows me to do the things that I'm doing today.
So when you got out of prison and you got out of rehab and you decided you weren't going to take drugs anymore, you went to law school, you graduated with honors from law school, did you have any idea at that point that you would not ever be able to practice law?
Yes, I did.
You did? You knew that?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
When I went to law school, I did not go to law school to become a lawyer or work at a huge firm. Earlier on in my recovery, when I had made a commitment to God to do his work, and I knew that, and that experience really led me to have this internal conversation where when I look at it, that God was showing me that no matter what position I was in, no matter how much money I had, no matter what my history was like, there was always someone that was worse off than me. And God's intent for us as human beings was to give back, because everything he created took a little and gave a little, right? And so I knew that I was committed to giving back to my community, to do whatever. When I wake up in the morning, I'm praying to God so he can give me wisdom, discernment, and stamina to do his work. You know, and so knowing that I'm embracing this and going out and doing his work, I mean, how there was like, you know, it's something that just creates an excitement, right?
You have a definite passion.
You know,
You definitely do.
It really does, because, you know, that's what life is all about. That's what really brings us the joy that we seek, because prior to that, I was searching for that joy. And I didn't even know I was searching for it. And it led me to drugs, it led me to other things, trying to find that space and trying to understand, why am I here? What's my purpose in life? And so once there was a connection, that all God wanted me to do was to give back. That was it. To be able to love a person, no matter what their stature, no matter where they are, you know, economically, socially, whatever, to be able to love another child, you know, a brother and sister in Christ. Once I found that out, it was off to the races.
So you are making an eternal difference today in a lot of people's lives, Desmond. You have started as executive director of Florida Rights Restoration Coalition. You are working really hard to restore rights to those who have been in prison, who have paid their debt to society, and now are out there and looking for purpose in life and looking to have a fulfilled, abundant life, many of them in Christ. So how are you... Well, there's so many things going through my mind. I don't even know what question to ask you next. Tell me about somebody whose life you've changed.
Wow. Man, that's good. I'll give you a good example. A young lady in Iowa that was addicted to meth, and she thought that, you know, her life would never change. And then she read a story that was printed in my first year of law school. She ended up getting off of drugs, going through rehabilitation, and eventually applying to law school. And today she's an attorney.
Praise God.
You know, the teacher in Scotland who was also an addict that didn't think that his life could go any further was inspired to do more. You know, even when I graduated, just the boyfriend of one of my classmates, this guy was into illegal activities, and he's out in the street hustling. And when he's seen what I've gone through and seen the medallions and the medals and the honors that I was getting, he was like, man, if this guy can do it, I can do it too. And he put his gun down, he put his drugs down, and committed to going back to school to become a better person.
Praise God.
You know? And there's countless other people that I probably never even heard of. But just the fact knowing that, you know, that people's lives can be changed just by witnessing or hearing about, you know, how God has worked in my life is like, man, that's what it's all about.
Desmond, we need success stories. We need to be inspired by men and women of God who are making a difference in their lives, who have gone from the pit, the miry pit, to being able to make an eternal difference in others' lives. So tell our viewers today what some of the rights that need to be restored are from people who have been in prison, some of the unfairness, injustices out there.
So let me shift that a little bit, right? Because this is so very important, because a lot of times when we talk about restoring civil rights of prisoners, you know, or we talk about the challenges that people face because of a felony conviction, a lot of times there's an assumption that the majority of them are in prison. The reality, and I can tell you for Florida, the reality is that less than 25% of people who are convicted of felony offenses are even sentenced to prison.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so you have an overwhelming amount of people, number of people who are suffering the same challenges or facing the same obstacles that a person coming out of prison would face as it relates to getting a job, as it relates to voting, as it relates to getting safe and affordable housing, you know, as it relates to being able to engage in a jury or to run for office, you know. So there are like countless collateral consequences that people are facing as a result of the conviction, you know. And so when you talk about, you know, I always like to remind it, because so many times, you know, especially as believers, right, we're sitting in our congregation and we're thinking about the person in prison that's suffering, and then the person right next to us sitting on the pew is also suffering that, but they may not talk about it because of the shame, you know, or their family or their sons or their daughters who have gone through some things, you know. And so what I try to do is I try to broaden the discussion so people can get an even more clearer picture of
I never thought about
people that are suffering.
And okay, so I'm going to ask you a really racist question then. Is the guy sitting beside you in church that never went to jail but was a convicted felon, is he white?
Chances are he's going to be, you know, and I don't consider that a racist question. I think that's a realistic question, right? The reality is that we do know that policing practices are heaviest in minority communities. And as a result, the majority of people who are getting incarcerated are people of color. But the reality is that especially when you look at mass incarceration, our criminal justice policies, we know that the greater percentage of minority communities do have negative interactions with law enforcement, but that doesn't exclude the white population as well. So for instance, in Florida, when we talk about a person losing their civil rights or the ability to vote, you know, while it impacts the African-American community, the reality is 3 times as many white people are not able to vote because of a prior felony conviction than African Americans. You know, and so how I look at this is that this is more than just not losing sight of the fact of the disproportionate impact, but at the heart of this is that I think it's more all-American. It's more, it transcends the racial lines and political lines. And we're talking about human beings, children of God, who've made mistakes, you know, and are now crying out for help, you know. And I think that there is a certain level of obligation, right? And the reason why I say that is because I am reminded of the prodigal son. You know, and when that son went out there and did all of the bad things and ended up at the lowest of lows when he was in the pigsty, you know, and said, wait a minute, what am I doing? When he, on his way returning home, the key element here is that the father did not wait on the porch for him to come all the way up. When he seen it, he ran to him. And so there is an obligation that when our people who were once lost is trying to find their way back, you don't wait for them to come all the way back. You run to them and you embrace them and you give him a ring of citizenship. You know, saying that we welcome you back into our society and our community. And the biggest part of citizenship is being able to have your voice heard.
And Desmond, the worst part about it is if that person is coming out of prison and they're trying to reintegrate into society and they don't have those rights, that's why the recidivism rate is so great, because if they can't find a job, they can't be treated like first-class citizens, they can't get a home, affordable housing, then what are they going to do? They're going to go right back into that same lifestyle, which puts them right back into jail.
Because we tell them, you're not part of us. You're not part of this society. You're not one of us. And so if we're, by our actions or our policies, excluding folks, you know. Now think of my kids, right? I have 4 boys and 1 girl. And I could tell you with the boys, they're going to do some boneheaded things in life, right? And some things are where you shake your head like, what were you thinking of, right?
That frontal lobe is just not developed yet,
Desmond. But here's the thing, no matter what they do, they never stop being my son.
That's right. And you're not going to punish them forever for one little crime that they commit?
You're banished from the Meade family. You'll never be a Meade, and you lose all my inheritance. Really? No. The thing is that my son, if they do something wrong, they're adequately or properly punished, right? but they're even forgiven during the punishment.
Yes.
That's the whole thing.
Yes.
You know, and they're
Right.
punished in a loving way, in a correcting way. You know, I'm not punishing you to hurt you. I'm punishing you to correct you.
To
and
restore you and then
There you
redeem
go.
your life. Let's talk about just for a minute, because I think it's getting ready to change legally, and you'll know this better than I do, but I know at one point the threshold for being a felon was a $300 crime,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Stealing a $300 cell phone can get me in jail,
Yes.
right?
And that, you know, Florida seems to love to be the worst of
Really?
everything, right, in
Yeah.
the country. Because in other states, the felony threshold is 2,500.
Wow.
You know, you can.
Are we trying to change that in Florida?
We're trying to change that in
Okay.
Florida, and the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition
Okay.
is a part
You're
of
a
that
big part of that.
change.
Good.
And one of the most beautiful things that I love about our organization is that we don't take on labels. And so our organization is comprised of people from all walks of life, even people that may consider themselves conservatives or progressives. We just come together under the lines of humanity and try to do what's right. And you know, when I'm thinking about it, everyone on our staff are believers.
Wow.
Right. And so I think that, you know, that is very helpful because we're coming from a place of love, you know, and we don't see all of the different lines. But even with this felony threshold bill,
Yes.
we were able to have one of our chapters in Fort Myers, Florida, actually play a prominent role in helping to move this along.
Good.
Because we know those limits were established years ago when gas was probably less than $2 a gallon, right?
Yeah. And it hasn't been changed in so long.
Yeah, and with the cell phones being so expensive, you know, if someone just takes a cell phone now, they're, you know, for the rest of their life, they're labeled as a felon.
Can't vote.
And they live in the state of Florida, they can't vote. You know, you was talking about, let's imagine Jesus walking the earth today. You know, and I was thinking, we just got through with Martin Luther King's birthday and everything. And what I thought about was that if Jesus and Martin Luther King was walking this earth today in Florida, chances are they wouldn't be able to vote either. You know, and so
Interesting.
those things like that really, and the felony threshold bill really screams of the need of Florida to really fix its broken system.
Well, and you're doing
really
that.
get in line with
but
the rest
that's
of
a
the
lot
country.
of what you're doing, and I appreciate that and applaud you for that. There is a bill that you worked very, very hard on that's going on the ballot in November, right? To restore rights of felons to vote.
Yes, it's a referendum that would restore the ability to vote to individuals after they've served their time. It would not apply to people who are convicted of murder or people who are convicted of felony sexual offenses. Those individuals would have to go through the normal process. But for everyone else, once they have completely served their time or repaid their debt, that they'll be immediately given that opportunity to have their voice
Are you
heard.
trying, I know that's a lot of what you do, are you trying to educate people about what this bill says? Because truthfully, here I am, white woman, right? Old white woman. I go to the ballot, I see it in November, and it says restoring rights of felons. That doesn't sound like a very good thing to do.
There's two simultaneous approaches, right? One approach is really educating people on the current system, which was recently declared unconstitutional, by the way, and talking about really highlighting how broken this system is, where you have a person who have paid their debt to society and is still languishing 20, 30, 40 years later and still cannot regain their civil rights. So that's one part about educating people.
Right.
But the other part is I don't think we really need to, when we talk about the convincing part, my conversation is really tapping into the spiritual aspect of it. I'm tapping into your faith because when you go to that poll and you say, okay, I am this older white lady reading this, what I want to stick out more than anything was when Christ was on the cross and that criminal asked him to be saved, that Jesus said that he didn't say you had to wait 5 or 7 years. Jesus said this day. And when we talk about our own salvation, it was immediate. You know, it wasn't no probationary period. And Jesus didn't ask him what he did.
That's right.
You know,
that's right.
Jesus didn't ask him what he did.
He forgave
because
him.
we have Moses who was committed murder. We had Paul who was once Saul.
Right.
You know, but yet, you know, I love that story because I think it was Ananias who was like, Lord, are you sure you sent me the right person? This guy's been persecuting us, right?
Right.
And God said, no, I've chosen him. You know? And so that's what I want you to take to the ballot box with you. The fact that I was once a sinner,
Yes.
and I'm a person that, you know, because I haven't met anyone yet who raised their hand and said, hey, I don't ever want to be forgiven for anything I do.
Right. And I
Right?
never did do anything wrong
Yeah,
either.
never did do anything wrong.
Yeah.
And so that right there, I believe,
Yeah.
carries the day, because that eliminates or transcends the political persuasions or leaning towards whether or not you want to vote for this.
Right.
It transcends the racial anxieties,
Right.
because it speaks, it strikes at the heart of what this is all about. And it's about forgiveness.
Right.
It's about redemption.
Right. Well, God has forgiven you in a big way. He's forgiven me in a big way, Desmond, and I cannot thank you enough for being here with us today and giving us your story and giving us some insight about this referendum that's coming up in November. And again, viewers, I'm not going to tell you how to vote. I don't know how to vote unless Jesus tells me how to vote. So this is something that you just need to prayerfully reflect upon, and also to do a lot of research on, so that you'll get a better understanding. And as Desmond said, it's a spiritual issue more than anything else. It's a redemption, a forgiveness. It's a what would Jesus do kind of an issue. And I'm so glad that Desmond has put his life in order, that he's allowed Jesus to be the center of his life and to give us a little bit more about his story. So thank you, Desmond Meade. You're a man of God.
Thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed my time with you.
Love you dearly. Stay with us, viewers. We have more coming up. Powerful words and discussions, even challenging in a lot of ways, right? Well, we know that you're busy, and we want to serve you in the best ways we can and make it even easier for you to find hope and be hope in this challenging world. That's why we're offering the shorter version of Welcome Home, called Welcome Home, Go. Friends, we need to be learning, applying our hearts to instruction, finding ways to be winsome to the world, but then going out and serving like Jesus would do. He would go. That's our calling. God's going to use you in ways you can't even imagine. So keep learning and growing, but take another step. You don't have to go across the ocean. Like the program you just saw, we want to share countless examples of ways you can change people's lives right here, right now. Go. Just make a difference in someone's life. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for watching Welcome Home, Go. I'll see you out there. God bless you.